6 months earlier, I pulled my Ford F-150 into the driveway of 437 Oakwood Lane for the first time as a homeowner. The truck rumbled to a stop, the sound of gravel beneath the tires signaling the end of my journey from the small apartment downtown to this pristine suburban neighborhood. Maple Crest Estates gleamed in the afternoon sun, rows of identical two-story homes with perfectly manicured lawns stretched out in every direction. I had saved for 10 years to afford this place, working double shifts as a contractor, and now my dream of homeownership had finally become reality. My truck stood out immediately. Among the sea of luxury sedans and compact SUVs that lined the driveways, my F-150, slightly weathered from years of construction sites and lumber hauls, looked like a workhorse among show ponies. The truck had belonged to my father before he passed away 3 years ago. He taught me everything I know about construction in that truck, the countless hours driving between job sites filled with lessons about craftsmanship and integrity. Letting go of it was never an option, regardless of where I lived. The first week in Maple Crest passed uneventfully. Neighbors stopped by with welcome baskets and polite smiles. The Johnsons to my right invited me to a barbecue. The elderly couple across the street brought over homemade cookies. Everyone seemed friendly enough, though I noticed their eyes lingering on my truck whenever they thought I was not looking. During the neighborhood welcoming committee visit, a small group of well-dressed women presented me with a thick binder of homeowners association rules and regulations. "We just want to make sure everyone understands our community standards," said a woman who introduced herself as Linda, the HOA president. Maple Crest has won the County Beautiful Neighborhood Award 3 years running. As they left, another woman lagged behind, Barbara Thompson, the HOA treasurer. She had not spoken during the visit but now glanced pointedly at my truck. "You will want to familiarize yourself with Section 7 about vehicle storage," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Most residents keep their work vehicles in the garage or off-site." I nodded politely but felt a twinge of unease. That night, I flipped through the binder, finding nothing that explicitly prohibited pickup trucks in driveways. The rules stated vehicles must be in good repair and not an eyesore, subjective terms that made me suspicious. 2 weeks after moving in, I received my first official HOA notice, a complaint about my mailbox color being non-standard desert tan rather than the approved sandstone beige. I repainted it immediately, not wanting to make waves. The following week, another notice appeared about my grass being a quarter-inch too tall. Minor infractions continued to arrive with increasing frequency. Each time I complied, but I began to notice a pattern. Barbara Thompson was always the one delivering the notices, and her gaze inevitably drifted toward my truck. One evening, while organizing my garage, I noticed Barbara walking slowly past my house, phone in hand, photographing my property. Something about her deliberate movements and furtive glances triggered a protective instinct. The next day, I installed a basic security system, 4 cameras covering the perimeter of my property, including one with a clear view of the driveway where my truck was parked. It seemed excessive at the time, but something told me it might prove necessary. At the first monthly HOA meeting I attended, I sat quietly in the back row. Barbara gave the financial report, then lingered on a section about enforcement of community standards. Her eyes found mine in the crowd as she emphasized the importance of maintaining property values through vigilance. The message was clear. I was being watched, and my truck was considered an eyesore. As I walked to my vehicle after the meeting, I could feel the tension in the air, thick and oppressive like the humidity before a storm. That night, as I polished my truck in the driveway, a weekly ritual honoring my father's memory, I could not shake the feeling that the quiet life I had hoped for in Maple Crest Estates was about to become anything but peaceful. The first note appeared 3 days after the HOA meeting, a small white paper tucked under my windshield wiper. Friendly reminder: commercial vehicles detract from our community aesthetic. Please consider garage storage. No signature, but the handwriting matched the flowing script I had seen Barbara use when signing HOA notices. I crumpled it up and tossed it into my glove compartment, where it would soon have company. The notes increased in frequency and directness over the following weeks. Your truck leaks oil. It did not. Vehicles must be washed weekly. No such rule existed. Parking direction violates Section 12.3. I checked. There was no Section 12.3. Each note more aggressive than the last, each on. Carefully preserved in my growing collection of harassment evidence. My security cameras captured the pattern. Barbara would circle my truck in the mornings when she thought no one was watching. Designer yoga pants and expensive athletic tops her uniform as she documented what she perceived as violations. Always with the same disapproving scowl, always with her phone camera aimed at my vehicle. The footage showed her placing the notes with dramatic flourishes, sometimes glancing toward my windows to see if I was watching. It was during my third week in Maple Crest that I finally learned who Barbara Thompson truly was. My neighbor Tom from 2 doors down stopped by while I was washing my truck. "I see Barbara has taken an interest in you," he said, leaning against his fence. "She seems particularly interested in my truck," I replied, rinsing suds from the hood. Tom shook his head. "Barbara has been on the HOA board for 12 years. Her husband is some big shot at the bank downtown. She drove out the last 3 homeowners who did not fit her vision for Maple Crest." "What did they do wrong?" I asked. "One had a boat in his driveway. Another ran a small bakery business from home. The third was a single mom with 3 kids who could not keep up with lawn maintenance. Barbara made their lives hell until they left." The next day brought our first direct confrontation. I was checking my mail when Barbara approached, clipboard in hand, and 2 other women flanking her like lieutenants. "We have received multiple complaints about your vehicle," she announced without greeting. "From whom?" I asked. "I have complied with every actual rule in the HOA guidelines." Barbara's finger jabbed toward my chest. "That truck degrades our community standards. The board has determined it qualifies as an eyesore under Section 5, Paragraph 3. The truck is clean, well-maintained, and not prohibited by any specific rule," I countered calmly. "Perhaps you would be happier in a neighborhood with," she paused, looking at my truck with disdain, "different standards." After this encounter, the neighborhood dynamic shifted visibly. Residents chose sides. Some, like Tom and the elderly couple across the street, would wave and chat warmly. Others averted their eyes and hurried past. The divide grew more pronounced when Barbara began bringing allies to photograph my truck and property. The breaking point came on a Friday evening. I arrived home from work to find Barbara and 2 board members standing in front of my house. "Your vehicle has become a neighborhood concern," she declared. "If it is not removed from view within 72 hours, we will begin formal proceedings for noncompliance penalties." "There is nothing in the bylaws that prohibits my truck," I stated firmly. Barbara's face hardened. "Things have a way of happening to vehicles that do not belong in Maple Crest. Insurance claims can be so complicated." The threat hung in the air between us. That night, I installed 2 additional high-definition cameras with night vision capability, positioned perfectly to cover every angle of my driveway and truck. As I mounted the final camera, I could not help but feel that Barbara Thompson had declared war, and I was preparing my defenses for whatever came next. Sunday mornings in Maple Crest Estates were typically peaceful. The sound of distant lawnmowers, children riding bikes, and the occasional barking dog the only interruptions to the suburban quiet. That particular Sunday started no differently. I sat at my kitchen table with coffee and the newspaper, enjoying the rare day off from construction sites and client meetings. The wail of police sirens shattered that peace at precisely 8:17 a.m. At first, I thought they were passing through the neighborhood on their way somewhere else. Then the siren stopped directly in front of my house. Through the window, I watched with growing alarm as two police cruisers pulled up, lights flashing. Officers emerged, approaching my truck with purposeful strides. One began examining the vehicle while another walked toward my front door. The pounding knock sent my heart racing. I opened the door to find two officers, expressions serious and professional. "Good morning, sir. Are you the owner of this residence?" the taller officer asked, notepad already in hand. "Yes, I am. Is there a problem?" I asked, though the sinking feeling in my stomach suggested I already knew the answer. "We received a report about that pickup truck in your driveway," he explained, gesturing toward my F-150. "Can you confirm whether this vehicle belongs to you?" "It absolutely does," I replied, confusion giving way to indignation. "I have owned it for 12 years. I have all the documentation inside." The second officer stepped forward. "Sir, we have received a detailed report that this vehicle was involved in suspicious activities last night, specifically transporting what appeared to be stolen property between midnight and 3 a.m. The caller also suggested the vehicle itself might be stolen, as it does not match the aesthetic of vehicles typically owned by Maple Crest residents. My mind reeled at the absurdity of the accusation. That is completely false. My truck was parked here all night. I was home sleeping. I have not moved it since yesterday afternoon when I returned from the hardware store. "Do you have any way to verify that?" the officer asked. A moment of clarity cut through my shock. "Actually, yes. I have security cameras covering my property, including the driveway where my truck is parked." Something in the officer's expression shifted, a flicker of interest. They followed me inside as I accessed the security system on my laptop. The timeline view clearly showed my truck parked in the exact same position from 5:43 p.m. Saturday until the police arrived Sunday morning. Not a single frame showed the vehicle moving. "I would also like to show you something else," I said, rewinding the footage further. "This is from earlier this morning, about an hour before you arrived." The screen displayed crystal-clear footage of Barbara Thompson standing at the edge of my property, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing emphatically toward my truck. The timestamp read 7:22 a.m. That is Barbara Thompson, HOA board treasurer. She has been issuing complaints about my truck since I moved in. Based on the timing, I believe she may be the one who called in this false report. The officers exchanged glances. The taller one made notes while his partner stepped aside to make a radio call. When he returned, his demeanor had changed. "Sir, we need to follow up on all reports, but it appears there may have been a misunderstanding. Could you provide us with your vehicle registration and identification to clear this up officially?" I retrieved my documentation, which they verified quickly. After a brief discussion outside, they returned to formally conclude their investigation. "Everything checks out, sir," the officer said. "I should inform you that filing a false police report is a serious offense. If you believe this was done maliciously, you have the right to file a complaint." As they prepared to leave, I noticed Barbara watching from down the street, her expression shifting from smug satisfaction to concern as she realized the officers were leaving without taking action against me or my truck. Once the police departed, I sat in stunned silence at my kitchen table. The coffee had gone cold, the peaceful Sunday destroyed. With shaking hands, I returned to the security footage, downloading and backing up multiple copies of the evidence. There she was, Barbara Thompson, deliberately making a false report, her body language animated as she spoke into her phone, repeatedly pointing at my truck. I zoomed in on her face during the call, the self-righteous determination in her eyes, the satisfied smile when she finished. The timestamp proved conclusively that I had been asleep inside my home during her alleged suspicious activities. I felt a cold anger replace the shock. This crossed a line from harassment into potentially criminal behavior. Had I not installed those cameras, I might now be trying to explain to police why my truck had been falsely implicated in criminal activity. That evening, I reviewed all the footage again, making multiple backups on different devices. The evidence was undeniable. Barbara Thompson had just made a serious mistake, one that would have consequences she clearly had not anticipated. Tomorrow, I would begin taking steps to ensure this level of harassment would never happen again. The law office of Martinez and Associates occupied the third floor of a modest building downtown. The reception area was cool and quiet, a welcome contrast to the chaos of recent days. Attorney Sophia Martinez greeted me with a firm handshake and led me to her office, a space filled with law books, organized files, and a window overlooking the city park. "So tell me what brings you here today," she said, notepad ready. I placed my laptop on her desk. "I need legal advice regarding harassment and a false police report filed against me and my property." For the next 30 minutes, I detailed the escalating situation with Barbara and the HOA. Sophia listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. When I reached the part about the police showing up at my door, her expression grew more serious. I turned my laptop toward her and played the security footage. "This is from yesterday morning. This woman, Barbara Thompson, is calling the police while pointing at my truck. Less than an hour later, officers arrived at my home accusing me of suspicious activity and suggesting my vehicle might be stolen." Sophia watched the footage, her expression neutral but her eyes narrowing at the critical moment when Barbara made the call. When the video ended, she leaned back in her chair. "What you have described, D, constitutes a pattern of harassment, and the false police report is potentially a criminal offense," she said. "Do you have documentation of the previous incidents as well?" I opened my briefcase and spread the contents across her desk. Printed emails from the HOA with Barbara's signature, photographs of every note left on my truck, a timeline of confrontations, and USB drives containing weeks of security, footage showing Barbara photographing my property. "I saved everything," I explained. "Every note, every interaction, every HOA complaint." Sophia examined the documents methodically. "This is very thorough. Most people do not document harassment so carefully." "I had a feeling it would get worse before it got better," I replied. Sophia outlined our options. We could file for a harassment restraining order, submit a formal complaint about the false police report, and potentially pursue civil damages for emotional distress and attempted defamation. The documentation would be crucial for each approach. 2 days later, we arranged a meeting with 3 other Maple Crest residents who had experienced similar treatment from Barbara. Tom from 2 doors down described how Barbara had issued daily fines when his wife was recovering from surgery and could not maintain their garden to HOA standards. An older woman named Alina recounted being reduced to tears at an HOA meeting when Barbara publicly humiliated her over a bird feeder. The third resident, a young father named Michael, shared documentation of Barbara trespassing on his property to photograph alleged violations. Their testimonies strengthened our case considerably. Sophia suggested we also examine the HOA bylaws for violations committed by Barbara herself. This led to our most surprising discovery. Barbara's own home violated at least 6 HOA regulations. Her garden wall exceeded height restrictions. Her satellite dish was installed in a prohibited location. She had modified her garage without proper approval, yet no complaints had ever been filed against her property. This demonstrates selective enforcement, Sophia explained. It is a common issue with problematic HOA board members who apply rules to others but exempt themselves. As our legal strategy took shape, Sophia educated me about the serious nature of filing false police reports. It is not just an HOA matter anymore. She potentially committed a crime that carries penalties including fines and even jail time in extreme cases. The police diverted resources to investigate you based on fabricated claims. Throughout these meetings, I felt a transformation occurring within me. The initial shock and victimization gave way to something more powerful, a determination to stand up not just for myself, but for everyone who had suffered under Barbara's reign of petty tyranny. My posture straightened. My voice grew more confident. My perspective shifted from defensive to strategic. By the end of the week, Sophia and I had assembled a comprehensive legal approach. First, we would file a police report about the false complaint. Second, we would present our evidence at the next HOA meeting. Third, depending on the outcome, we would pursue civil action. "Are you prepared for this?" Sophia asked as I gathered my files at our final preparatory meeting. "It could get uncomfortable." "I am done being bullied over a truck that breaks no rules," I replied. It is time someone stood up to her. As I left the office that afternoon, I no longer felt like a victim of circumstance, but rather someone empowered to challenge injustice, someone willing to face conflict in pursuit of what was right. The Maple Crest Community Center buzzed with tension as residents filed in for the monthly HOA meeting. Attendance was unusually high. Word had spread that there would be interesting developments regarding recent complaints. I sat quietly in the middle row, my laptop and small projector placed on the seat beside me. Sophia had advised me to remain calm regardless of provocation, letting the evidence speak for itself. Barbara arrived 5 minutes before the meeting, wearing a tailored blazer and pearls, her power outfit for official HOA business. She nodded to her allies as she took her place at the board table, arranging her papers with practiced precision. If she noticed me, she gave no indication. The meeting began with standard proceedings, approval of previous minutes, budget updates, and landscaping committee reports. Throughout it all, Barbara maintained her composed facade, occasionally making notes with her gold pen. When the meeting reached the new business portion of the agenda, she rose with confident poise. "Before we continue to general concerns, I would like to address an ongoing issue regarding community standards," she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "We have a responsibility to maintain the character and quality of Maple Crest Estates." Without naming me directly, she launched into a carefully crafted speech about problem residents and vehicles that undermine property values. Her gaze fixed pointedly in my direction as murmurs of agreement came from her supporters. "We must consider what actions are necessary when individuals refuse to comply with the aesthetic standards that make our neighborhood special," she concluded with rehearsed conviction. Linda, the HOA president, thanked Barbara and asked if anyone else had new business to discuss. The room fell silent as I raised my hand and stood. I would like to address the board regarding false accusations and harassment, I said, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. Barbara's expression flickered with momentary concern before settling back into practiced confidence. I have prepared a brief presentation, I continued, moving to connect my laptop to the projector system. It concerns actions taken by an HOA board member that I believe violate both HOA bylaws and potentially state law. The room grew silent as the projector warmed up. I had practiced this presentation multiple times with Sophia, focusing on facts rather than emotions. The first slide appeared, a simple timeline of events since I moved into Maple Crest. Since becoming a homeowner here 3 months ago, I have received 17 official HOA complaints, all delivered by Treasurer Thompson. I have complied with every legitimate request, despite many citing rules that do not actually exist in our bylaws. Barbara shifted in her seat but maintained her composure. I continued methodically through the evidence, the notes left on my truck, the confrontations, the escalating threats. Then I reached the critical portion. Last Sunday morning, police officers arrived at my home following a report that my truck was stolen or involved in criminal activity. This claim was entirely false, as verification of my ownership documentation confirmed. I clicked to the next slide. However, my home security system captured the origin of this false report. The footage played with perfect clarity on the wall behind the board members, Barbara making the call from the edge of my property, her theatrical gestures toward my truck, her animated conversation. The timestamp in the corner contradicting her claims about nighttime activities. Gasps and whispers rippled through the audience, Barbara's face drained of color. The responding officers confirmed that filing a false police report is a serious offense, I explained calmly. I have filed a formal complaint with the police department, and they are investigating. The room erupted into shocked conversations. Linda struggled to restore order, tapping her gavel repeatedly. When quiet finally returned, Barbara stood, her composure cracking. "This is ridiculous. I was reporting suspicious activity I genuinely observed," she insisted, her voice higher than usual. I clicked to the next slide. Overnight footage showing my truck unmoved for the entire period in question, timestamp clearly visible. The security system records motion. There was none around my vehicle during the hours you claim to have witnessed suspicious activity, I stated. Furthermore, I have statements from 3 other residents detailing similar patterns of harassment. The board president called for an immediate executive session, asking residents to clear the room. As people filed out, many approached me with quiet words of support or shared their own stories of intimidation. The meeting had been adjourned chaotically, but the evidence had been seen by everyone present. In the parking lot afterward, Barbara approached me directly, her carefully maintained facade finally crumbling. Her voice had lost its authoritative edge, replaced by something closer to desperation. "You have no idea what you have done," she hissed. "I was trying to maintain standards in this community. That truck does not belong here." I remained calm, remembering Sophia's advice. The HOA bylaws do not prohibit pickup trucks. They prohibit harassment and selective enforcement of rules. "This is not over," she warned, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her understanding that actions have consequences, and hers were finally catching up with her. "You are right about one thing," I replied quietly. "This is not over. The police investigation into your false report is just beginning." As she stormed toward her luxury SUV, I noticed several residents watching the exchange from a distance. The power dynamics of Maple Crest Estates had shifted dramatically in the span of a single meeting. Whatever happened next, the neighborhood would never be quite the same. The police station had a different atmosphere when I walked in voluntarily rather than being summoned. Detective Wilson, a veteran officer with graying temples and reading glasses perched on his nose, reviewed my evidence with professional detachment in a small interview room. "I have been on the fork, for 22 years, he said, replaying the security footage for the third time. "This is textbook filing of a false report. The timing, the gestures, the immediate police response, and her prior history of complaints against you establish a clear pattern." He made detailed notes as I provided context about the ongoing harassment. When I finished my statement, he leaned back in his chair, removing his glasses. "We take these matters seriously," he explained. "Police resources are limited, and false reports put officers and citizens at risk." Officers responded to her call believing they might encounter a criminal situation, which creates unnecessary tension. 2 days later, I received a call from Detective Wilson confirming that Barbara had been officially charged with filing a false police report. The district attorney had reviewed the evidence and determined the case was solid enough to proceed. Barbara would be facing a court date and potential penalties, including fines and community service. News travels quickly in small communities. By the following evening, the HOA board had called an emergency meeting that drew the largest attendance in neighborhood history. Folding chairs filled every available space in the community center as residents arrived early to secure seats. The boardroom, designed for 50 comfortably, now strained to hold nearly 100 people. Linda, the HOA president, appeared visibly uncomfortable as she called the meeting to order. "Given recent developments, the board must address allegations against one of our members and determine appropriate actions in accordance with our bylaws." A formal vote was held regarding Barbara's position as treasurer. The outcome was nearly unanimous. Only Barbara herself and 2 loyal friends voted against her removal. When the results were announced, a palpable sense of relief spread through the room, like a collective exhale from residents who had lived under her strict regime for years. After the meeting, people I had never spoken with approached me with their stories. An older gentleman described how Barbara had reported his classic car as an eyesore, despite its pristine condition. A young couple recounted receiving daily violation notices after painting their front door a shade of blue that Barbara deemed not in keeping with neighborhood aesthetics, though it was on the approved color list. The following week brought unexpected media attention when a local news station ran a segment about HOA overreach, featuring anonymous accounts from Maple Crest residents. They did not name Barbara directly, but the story referenced a board member charged with filing a false police report in an attempt to force compliance with unofficial standards. Barbara's attempts to control the narrative through neighborhood emails and social media posts backfired spectacularly. Each defensive statement she issued prompted more residents to come forward with their own experiences. Her once powerful position in the community crumbled as former allies distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with her increasingly desperate attempts to justify her actions. The courthouse was solemn on the morning of Barbara's hearing. I sat quietly in the back row as instructed by the prosecutor. Barbara arrived with her husband and an expensive-looking attorney, her expression a mixture of indignation and fear. She had dressed conservatively in muted colors, a stark contrast to her usual bold statements of authority. The judge, An older woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind reviewed the evidence thoroughly. When the security footage played in the courtroom, Barbara stared straight ahead, refusing to watch her own actions exposed on the screen. "Mrs. Thompson," the judge said after all evidence had been presented, "the court takes false reports very seriously. They waste valuable public resources and can create dangerous situations for all involved." Barbara's attorney offered mitigating factors: her years of community service, her lack of prior criminal record, her genuine belief that something was amiss with my truck. The prosecutor countered with evidence of the ongoing harassment campaign, suggesting the false report was the culmination of months of targeted behavior. The judge delivered her verdict with measured words: 60 hours of community service, a substantial fine of $2,500, and a permanent record that would follow Barbara long after this case concluded. As the gavel fell with finality, Barbara's carefully constructed facade crumbled completely. Her shoulders slumped as the reality of her situation settled upon her. Outside the courthouse, I declined to comment to a waiting reporter from the local paper. This had never been about public humiliation or revenge. It was about standing up to bullying and abuse of power. As I walked to my truck, I felt no joy in Barbara's downfall, only relief that justice had been served and that the neighbor who might now heal from years of divisive leadership. Spring arrived in Maple Crest Estates with more than just blooming flowers and warmer temperatures. A sense of renewal swept through the community like a fresh breeze. The HOA board, now under new leadership with Linda as president and Tom as treasurer, introduced revised guidelines that emphasized fairness and necessity over rigid aesthetic controls. The changes came gradually but definitively. The board established a more transparent violation reporting process, requiring photographic evidence and specific bylaw citations. They created an appeals committee consisting of non-board residents to review contested violations. Most importantly, they developed a philosophy of necessary enforcement, focusing only on issues that genuinely affected property values or neighbor relationships rather than personal preferences. My role in the community evolved unexpectedly. Residents who had once hurried past without making eye contact now stopped to chat when they saw me working on my truck in the driveway. Some even shared stories of their own vehicles, classic cars, work trucks, motorcycles, that they had kept hidden in garages under the previous regime. "I actually have a restored 1967 Chevelle," confessed my neighbor Robert, whom I had barely spoken with previously. "Been afraid to bring it out because Barbara would find some reason it violated the rules. Think I might get it out this weekend." When the board established a committee to develop fair vehicle policies, they asked if I would consider serving as chair. I accepted, bringing together a diverse group of residents to create guidelines that balanced community appearance with practical needs. Our resulting recommendations, focusing on vehicle condition and proper parking rather than type or age, passed with overwhelming support at the next HOA meeting. Barbara remained largely absent from community events following the court case. Her fine paid and community service hours gradually fulfilled at the downtown homeless shelter. She kept to herself, her former confidence shattered by the public exposure of her actions. On a crisp morning in late spring, a moving truck appeared outside her house. Professional movers loaded designer furniture as Barbara supervised from the sidelines, not making eye contact with passing neighbors. By afternoon, a "sold" sign appeared in the yard. She was leaving Maple Crest without goodbyes or explanations. That evening, I sat on my front porch watching the sunset paint the neighborhood in warm golden hues. My truck sat in the driveway, freshly washed and waxed, no longer a source of conflict, but a symbol of standing firm against intimidation. Children played freely on sidewalks that had once been patrolled for violations. Neighbors chatted across property lines without lowering their voices when discussing home improvement plans. The security cameras remained mounted around my property, but their purpose had evolved. Now they captured pleasant moments, a family of rabbits that had taken up residence beneath my porch, the mail carrier leaving packages with a friendly wave, impromptu block gatherings that spilled across lawns with no one keeping score of whose grass was a quarter-inch too tall. Maple Crest Estates had transformed from a collection of houses governed by fear and rigid conformity into something that actually deserved the name community. The change had required confrontation and discomfort, but the outcome proved worth the struggle. As twilight settled over the neighborhood, I reflected on lessons learned through this ordeal. Standing up to bullies rarely feels comfortable in the moment, but often proves necessary for lasting change. Evidence matters more than accusations. And sometimes, the very thing someone tries to use against you, in my case, a pickup truck that allegedly did not belong, becomes the catalyst for positive transformation. My truck now parked proudly in the driveway, not as an act of defiance but as a comfortable certainty. It belonged here, just as I did, in a community that had learned the difference between standards worth maintaining and control worth challenging.